Hello and welcome. I'm Alex Fensham, the General Manager here at Habibi Film Rentals, and today we're going to do a review on the new Vazen full-frame 1.8x anamorphic lenses. We've had our eye on these lenses since they were announced, and we've had the pleasure of playing with them and testing them for the past few weeks. The cinema lens market is experiencing a really exciting period at the moment that I like to call the affordable glass revolution. We're seeing a ton of new cinema lenses coming from companies like DZO Film, Laowa, Sigma, Rokinon, Tokina, and of course Vazen that are not only affordable but have really great optics. The Vazens definitely fall into this category. With a list price of around $10,000 US per lens, they're relatively affordable, and they're meant to compete with companies like Atlas, who have cinema anamorphics at a similar price point. So the big question we're going to try to answer today in this review is, are they any good relative to their place in the market? So let's talk about overall specs first. Right now there are 3 focal lengths in the full frame lineup from Vazen, a 50mm t2.1, 85mm t2.8, and a 135 t2.8. They all have a 1.8x squeeze factor, meaning they'll give you an aspect ratio of 239:1 when shot on a 4x3 target and de-squeezed. The headline, of course, is that they are full frame anamorphics, and they'll cover full frame and open gate sensors, including the VistaVision size sensor on the new RED V-RAPTOR and the open gate sensor on the RED LF. They all have a standard 95mm front diameter with an 86mm thread, and they weigh between 3.42 pounds and 4.4 pounds with a wide open aperture of t2.1 to t2.8 across the set, so they're relatively fast for full frame anamorphic glass. So on paper they look pretty good, but how do they perform in the real world? Well, let's first talk about their optical performance. The look of lenses is a very subjective thing, particularly with anamorphic lenses. Personally, I quite like the look of the Vazens. I find them to have nice color rendition, pleasant fall off, and a good amount of sharpness, particularly if you close them down a bit. The bokeh is pretty geometric and frankly a bit ugly and distracting on the 50 and 85mm, particularly when they're wide open, although this isn't uncommon with anamorphics in this price range. You get a much nicer oval bokeh on the 135mm, particularly when you close down a bit. All the lenses in the set are decently sharp for budget anamorphics, and they're certainly sharper than the direct price point competitor in the Atlas Orion anamorphics. I find the anamorphic distortion on the lenses to be quite controlled. You definitely get that anamorphic feel and character in the way that they resolve vertical lines, but there isn't a lot of distortion and barreling on the 50mm, the widest of the set. There's definitely focus breathing on all 3 lenses, however it's pretty controlled for anamorphic glass. And the lenses seem to hold contrast pretty well across the set. Alright, so let's talk about the flares. I find the flares in the Vazens to be quite distinctive. All 3 lenses have 3 distinct aspects to the flares: the streak, horizontal artifacts, and vertical artifacts. I find the flares in the Vazens to be quite thick. What I mean by that is that there are several layers of horizontal artifacts to each flare. This is particularly true on the 135mm that I personally think flares in a very distracting way, especially if you're closed down a bit, with many horizontal artifacts all stacking on top of each other. I find it to be a lot more controlled in the 50 and 85mm, but personally I would avoid flaring the 135 too much. Although again, lenses are all subjective, particularly when it comes to anamorphic flares. The 50mm and 85mm also have some vertical artifacts, although personally I find these to be quite controlled and pleasant. All the lenses streak nicely and naturally, and the lenses aren't overly flary, meaning it's relatively easy to flag them off to control flaring if you want to reduce it. The flares definitely have a blue hue to them, but they seem a little bit more neutral than the Atlas Orion flares. With white light sources, you do get some dimension to the flares. And if you flare them with colored light sources, they will for the most part adopt the color of the source in the flare. Overall, I personally quite like the look of the Vazens. They feel cinematic and dramatic, and they have a constrained character to them that I find to be quite interesting. You can push them to be distinctive, or you can use them in a subtle way to add that anamorphic feel to your project. They're decently sharp but still pretty smooth, and they have a really pleasing fall-off, especially when you're shooting on large format. The flares are definitely particular and a matter of personal preference. For me personally, they aren't my favorite anamorphic flare, but I can definitely live with them for the other benefits of the lenses. When talking about bang for your buck, I think the Vazens are great value for the images that they create. Alright, so let's now move on to the build quality and design. It's here that I have a few quips and critiques. So the overall build seems to be quite good. They feel solid, and the manufacturing on the housing, gears, and markings is very clean and precise. The irises are all very smooth and well greased, with a good amount of resistance that I would expect on a cinema lens iris. The focus is fairly good on all three. It's smooth, but it isn't as smooth as some other modern cine lenses, and it feels to me like it could use just a little bit more grease, but it's definitely still acceptable. So let's talk a little bit about the focal lengths in the set. The widest at the moment is 50mm, which initially may feel a little too telephoto for you. It may leave you wanting something a little wider, like a 40 or 32mm, but what you need to remember is that this is a 50mm that covers full frame. The actual field of view that it gives you is similar to a 32mm Atlas Orion, which is Super 35. Because of this, I actually think the issue with the set is I wish there was something a bit longer. The 135mm has a similar field of view to an 80mm Super 35 anamorphic, so it would be nice to see a 150 or even a 180mm in the set eventually. The focus throw on all three lenses appears to be less than 180 degrees, which I find to be disappointing from a professional production standpoint. And here's one of my biggest criticisms of these lenses. On the 50 and 85mm, the focus scale does not have specific scale markings. As a former focus puller, this drives me crazy. Cinema lenses are a precise tool, and it's hard to be precise without being able to line up the witness mark to a specific marking at a measurement. The 135mm does have proper markings, and it's the most recently released lens in the set, so hopefully Vazen has received this feedback and will tweak their marking design for future lenses. The form factor is fine. They don't look as professional as Atlas Orion anamorphics or some of the other budget cinema lenses that have been released recently, but I imagine the form factor design was a choice to reduce weight and maintain a 95mm front diameter. And they do get full marks for weight. The heaviest Vazen, the 135, is lighter than the lightest Atlas Orion anamorphic. So here is my biggest complaint with the design of the Vazens. Each lens comes with a convex lens cap, meaning that when you place it down on a flat surface, you know, as you would constantly be doing all the time, the lenses wobble around. What on earth possessed them to make this decision? It drives me crazy. It's such an easy thing to fix, and I don't know why someone at Vazen at some point didn't say, hey, maybe we shouldn't use a convex lens cap. Every single time I place them down on a table, my blood pressure rises when they wobble. So, to summarize, overall, I think the Vazen full-frame anamorphics are a remarkable achievement, and they're really good value for full-frame anamorphics. For their price point, they produce really great, beautiful anamorphic images. Overall, their build quality is good, but there's definitely some design choices that leave me scratching my head. These lenses are really good, but with some design tweaks, I think they could be great. I would definitely use them on a project that calls for the anamorphic look, and I think they're a great way to add a ton of production value at an economical rate. Most of all, I'm just really excited to see what Vazen does next, and I'm loving watching this affordable cinema glass revolution. If you're in the Greater Toronto area and you'd like to test the Vazens in our shop or think that they're perfect for your next project, please do get in touch. We'd love to arrange for you to get your hands on them. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.